Here are 3 questions to ask yourself as you enter Q2 to ensure that it is going to be full of relevant and intentional growth for your business. This is episode number 308 of Starting the Conversation. I am your host, Alice Benham, and I am incredibly passionate about goal setting, and more specifically, setting goals in a way that is genuinely effective, right? Second to the feeling in January of I must set goals and get planning, I think is the feeling at the start of each quarter where we probably have the same nudge. I personally love thinking about the year in quarters, and there's actually a goal setting method that I've created that I use not just within my businesses, but has been used across hundreds, if not thousands of other business owners over the years, which revolves around this idea of setting quarterly goals. It's called the AB method, and there's 3 steps to it. You set yearly intentions, you set quarterly goals, and then you create an action plan. And there's a reason that the AB method revolves around the idea of quarterly goals, because I believe they are the ideal way to bridge the gap between your big vision and your day-to-day action. On a quarterly basis, I think we have a brilliant opportunity to just kind of tighten our strategy within our businesses, to get that bit more intentional about where we're going. And ultimately, what that's all about is to help ourselves take action within that quarter to move ourselves forwards. Whether for you, Q1 was really successful and full of momentum and growth, or whether it maybe felt like a bit of a slower, gentler start to the year, or maybe felt quite sticky or quite difficult, you have an opportunity now to kind of draw a bit of a line and enter Q2 with that kind of fresh intention. So with that in mind, I want to share with you 3 questions that you can ask yourself in your business, which are questions that I will be asking myself, questions that I will be asking my On It community, which if you're not familiar is the space where I help over 120 business owners every month to work on their businesses and follow the AB method in an effective and easeful way. And these are questions that I think are really key. Right? It's easy when we're entering a new quarter or starting a new year and thinking about this idea of having a bit more intention to just think like, oh, I'm just going to sit down and like write down all my goals. Or I'm just going to sit down and like write a list of all the things I want to do. Right? I'm just going to sit down and make like a vision board. And all of those things might be helpful and relevant in some ways, but I want to make sure that you are asking questions that are going to really give you what you need. Because ultimately, I do not believe in setting goals for the sake of it. I believe in setting goals that are actually going to be useful for us. And these 3 questions will help you to set goals for Q2 that are actually useful for you. One quick thing I want to say before I dive into these is that right now, if you're listening to this episode around the time that it's coming out, you have an opportunity to join my group program On It for the rest of this year. If you're not familiar, On It is a little bit like a personal trainer, but for working on your business. So I hold space for you each month to connect to your big vision, set goals, track your progress, and ultimately do this stuff, you know, the questions that I'm talking about today and the ongoing action taking, but with ease. We all know that working on your business and doing this work is important, but we also all know that it's really hard to prioritize and no one teaches you how to do this stuff. So that is exactly why On It exists. And only for the next couple of days are the doors open for you to join for the rest of the year. They're then going to be shut for another 3 months at least. So if you're keen to join us, consider this one of your final reminders. The link will be in the show notes, unless of course you're listening to this episode a little bit too late, in which case you've missed out on joining, but you can obviously still use what I've shared in this episode, not just as a taster of On It, but also as value within itself. So with that in mind, let's dive in. The first question to ask yourself as we enter Q2 is, what is the big vision in my business that I am moving towards this year? Now, that might be a question that feels quite easy for you to answer, or it might be a question that feels quite overwhelming to even hear me say. Wherever you sit on that kind of spectrum of reaction is totally fine, but it's so important that we ask ourselves this question of what is the big vision? Because every time that we go to set goals, we need to make sure that those goals align with the vision. The biggest mistake I see people make when they set goals is that they set goals that don't actually align with their vision. They set goals from a place of what they could do, or what everyone else is doing, or what feels shiny, or what they feel pressured to do. And what will happen when you set goals through that lens is that you'll set goals that you're not actually motivated to achieve. And if you do end up achieving them, they're not going to give you what you want. You're not going to care about it because it wasn't aligned for you. So that big vision is absolutely fundamental. You know, the AB method that I kind of briefly mentioned already, step 1 is having those clear yearly intentions. It's because those yearly intentions help you to understand your vision for the year that will set you up to have the right goals. So you need to ask yourself the question as we enter Q2, what is the vision? And more specifically, what is the vision for this year? Where do you want your business to be by the end of this year? And I'm totally okay if your answer to that feels a little bit vague. I don't always know exactly where my business is going to be by the end of this year. And I'm not asking you to have that level of detail in your clarity either. But what I am asking you to have is an understanding for yourself of how you want your business to grow this year. What areas do you want to see your business to change in? How would you like to see your business evolve? If at the end of this year you felt like the year had been a success, what would that look like? You need to be able to answer that question. Even if your answer feels a little bit vague and you think, oh, I'm not 100% sure, it could be clearer, that's okay. It'll get clearer through action. And hey, I don't think anyone's vision ever feels crystal clear. It's always evolving, right? But we've got to be able to answer that question to then create plans and set goals that are the right fit for us. So that's your first question to answer. What is the vision that I'm moving towards this year in my business? If you're not sure what the vision is, I released an episode at the very start of the year that's going to help you to do that. So I'll link that in the show notes. And I've also got a worksheet and guided audio to help you to set that vision and those yearly intentions. It's in my strategy shop. And again, I'll link that in the show notes too. The second question then to ask yourself as we enter Q2 is one that I so rarely hear people inviting people to answer. When I hear people talking about goal setting, especially in the January hype when everyone's talking about setting goals, I so rarely hear this question being talked about. But let me tell you, I think it's one of the most important, is what is my capacity for achieving goals in Q2? What I mean by this question is how big are my goals able to be to still be realistic? Now, let me just get something straight. I believe in being overambitious. I believe in dreaming big, but I do not believe in setting goals that are not built with your capacity in mind. When we set goals that are overambitious, when we set goals that are too big for the time that we have, 99.9% of the time what we're doing is beginning a cycle of frustration and disappointment because you're not going to achieve the goal, you'll feel bad for it, you'll blame yourself, you'll have a worse identity, and the cycle continues from there. When we are overambitious with our goals, we very often just create lack of action. Be overambitious with the results, be overambitious with the big vision, but when it comes to planning out a quarter, be mindful that 3 months is not an infinite and it is also even not a huge amount of time. So we need to understand the capacity. So here I would invite you to think about things like what is already coming up in Q2 that you need to be mindful of. Maybe you've got a big holiday. Maybe you've got some family commitments. Maybe there's half term and that affects you, or Easter holidays. Maybe you've got something happening in your personal life. Maybe you've got a big launch in your business. Maybe you're onboarding a big new client. Maybe you're changing offices. Maybe you're moving house. I don't know what's coming up in your Q2, but I want to make sure that you know about it so you can plan with it in mind. If your capacity for Q2 is at 50% and you can understand that from here, you can make sure that the goals that you set are going to be aligned with that. And you'll still be able to set goals that feel stretchy and move you forwards, but they're not going to be goals that feel completely overambitious and just end up frustrating and disappointing you. So that's your second question to answer. What is going to be my capacity in Q2 for growing my business? Therefore, how can I set goals that are going to be aligned with that? Which then brings me on to the third and final question to ask yourself as you enter this next quarter, which is what is most important about how my business grows in the next 3 months? When you are setting goals for the quarter ahead, what you're really doing is creating a goalpost for yourself around where you want your business to be in 3 months' time. A goal is merely a kind of marker point towards the big vision. I don't believe that goals are what you want. I believe goals are how you get to what you want. So when you're thinking about your goals for the quarter, you kind of need to reverse engineer it, right? You don't just begin by thinking about like, what might I want to do in Q2? And, oh, maybe I want to start a podcast. Maybe I want to launch that product. Maybe I want to create this content. Maybe I want to go to that event. Don't start there. That's how we set goals that are just random and irrelevant. Start with, right, where do I want my business to be by the end of these 3 months? If in 3 months' time, your business felt like it moved forwards in a meaningful way, what does that look like? Imagine yourself even, right? At the end of, I always have to do the mental maths here, April, May, June. Imagine yourself at the end of June, right? Oh my gosh, wow, that's going to be in and or close to summer, which is just great to think about, isn't it? But let's imagine the end of June. If you were at a certain place with your business that felt really intentional, don't go too extreme. Think about, right, where really could you be by the end of June? Dream a little bit big, not too big. Let's think about that point. What does that look like for you? What would success look like at the end of Q2? Start with getting clarity there, because if you can understand what is most important about your growth in the next 3 months, you can then set goals that are going to directly contribute to that. It's so easy in business to be busy, right? It's so easy to set goals that are just ideas of all the things we could do. Really effective, easeful, kind of intentional growth comes when we tune into what is most important to us. When you ask yourself the question of like, but really, where do I want things to be? Not what's all the different ways that the business could grow, but actually which areas do I most want and need to see that growth within? So that's the third and final question to ask yourself. What is most important about my growth for Q2? Where do I want to be at the end of that June point? And what that's then going to help you to do, and all of these questions are going to add together to help you to do, is to then set goals for Q2 that are really aligned. Strategic goals link with your vision, align with your capacity, and align with really where you want your business to be in 3 months' time. It's not about going, what could I do in the next quarter? Okay, cool, those are my goals. There's a process. There's a method. I've even understood this for myself as I've begun teaching more of this in my program On It, is I'm realizing, wow, there's a real science to effective goal setting. As I'm teaching this in a group setting and facilitating it, it's realizing actually, 10% is thinking about the goals. 90% is all of these other questions and steps which help us to then set the goals that are actually right for us. If you are going to have goals for Q2, please, on my behalf at least, let them be goals that are actually going to help you. I'd rather you have no goals if they're not going to align with your vision, align with your capacity, and actually align with where you want your business to be. So if you are setting goals, to make sure that they're being done the right way, these are the 3 questions to ask yourself. What's the vision? What's my capacity? And what is most important about my growth in Q2? If you can spend some time off the back of this episode reflecting on those 3 questions, you are going to set yourself up for a really intentional but also sustainable beginning to the quarter. I do not believe in that kind of New Year energy at the start of every quarter where we just, have crazy momentum for 2 weeks and then that kind of dies out. I want this to feel really sustainable. I want you to set yourself up to be consistently taking action in Q2. And these kind of questions are really going to help you to do that. I really hope that you find these questions valuable. In fact, I know that if you spend time off the back of this episode reflecting on these questions, you will find that valuable, because it's dedicating that space where you can really step back, connect to your vision, connect to what you want within the business, put the blinkers on and set yourself up to take more intentional but more easeful action moving forwards. If this is resonating and you're like, gosh, I love questions like this, I love this expert structure, let me just tell you that On It is this, but 360. This is exactly what we do within the program. I hold space and I facilitate so that you're not sat there trying to pluck your goals out of thin air, but I'm really taking you through the process so that you end up with these goals that feel like a really good fit. And ultimately, let's be honest here, what the key thing is, you take the action and then your business grows. As we now finish the first quarter of On It, it's been amazing to see people having done their Q1 goals and achieved them, and almost be shocked at themselves and go, oh, I've never actually achieved my goals before in the actual time frame that I planned to. And it's amazing. But obviously to me, it's well, yeah, obviously, because you followed the method and it worked, and you set these goals from a strategic place. So if that's resonating and you're listening to this episode around the time that it comes out, you probably do not have long to join us for the rest of the year in On It. The link will be in the description or the show notes wherever you're tuning into this episode. And whether you join On It or not, I really encourage you to ask yourself these questions. Enter Q2 with as much intention as you can. Your future self, your future growth, where you are by the end of Q2 is going to be incredibly grateful for it. Thank you for tuning in. Follow or subscribe wherever you are listening. And I'll be back with an episode next Tuesday answering some of your business dilemmas.